All right, folks. Well, welcome everybody to this week's absolutely wonderful and very prestigious DevRel AMA. Let's give people some more time to trickle in. As you may see, we have an additional guest on stage, but this time it's not Sorinko. Sorinko is on leave, already very burned out from working with us. No, I'm just kidding. And we have a different guest for today. Maybe let's introduce you first. How's it going? I'm not going to give away your name even.
Okay.
Just to make it into like a proper big reveal.
Proper big reveal. Okay. Hey guys. So my name's Lorexia. I am half French, half Mexican, currently somewhere in Spain, and recently became a part of the DevRel team, actually last week, and have been working on a few secret projects that I hope we'll be able to reveal soon. Since then, well, I traditionally come from quite a businessy and growth-oriented background. I worked at a VC, I worked at a L'Oreal, the mega corp, and then I joined Web3 in 2017. My first role was working for within the teams of an SSI startup. So the idea of creating a self-sovereign identity infrastructure. And then I moved on. I mean, I collaborated with a friend of mine who's a pretty good hacker on a privacy-oriented project that we called Enigma, that we managed to get incubated at one of Mozilla's Mozilla Firefox program, which was called Free the Internet. But because we had issues monetizing the project, because there seems that from an economical perspective, there's always inefficiencies when it comes to privacy, which is something that we're trying to solve at NYM. I moved on and joined Tezos, which some of you may probably know, which is an L1, to help expand the ecosystem and oversee their global grants program. And then I moved on and worked as head of growth for a DeFi protocol. And later on, I decided to take a more tech-centric role within a company with a clear purpose. And here I am. And it's great to be here. So thanks so much for having me.
Amazing. Well, welcome to the team officially as well. How have you been so far? How has work been? Is Max treating you well? Is he a good boss? He can't hear you now.
Okay. Why do you lie like that, pseudo? No, yeah, he's been amazing. Everyone has been amazing. I think I got a gist that everyone is really busy at the moment because we have so much going on. I mean, lots of learning, the first days were basically like introducing myself to the team, getting to know as many people as I could. The team has obviously grown very fast in the past few months. So there's a sense of happy chaos around in that everything is super dynamic, moving all the time. We have a bunch of things running at the same time from different teams. So it's super exciting, really. I'm excited to see the results that will land in the coming weeks or month.
Yeah, well, everybody's very busy because there's a lot going on. You maybe should get used to that. That's kind of the current perpetual state.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. Big time.
You'll never be bored, which is a great thing.
Oh, I haven't. I mean, I haven't had a minute since I started, so it's great.
All right. Well, I guess now that we have the big reveal out of the way, maybe we should start with the release update. Max, how's it going? What happened over the past 2 weeks?
So the biggest thing that happened that actually kind of isn't really in the changelog that everyone will have noticed was that we did a chain upgrade for Nix, which went very well. I mean, it didn't just go well. Obviously, quite a lot of people, myself included, have been working on a lot of testing out a lot of stuff for a couple of weeks beforehand. So it wasn't just luck. And obviously, we have a really good validator set as well, which is great. So they're always very supportive. What actually does that upgrade mean? Basically, it's just upgrading the actual, the binary, the actual software that each of the validators runs to maintain consensus. And I won't go too much into it, but the main things that were kind of upgraded in that, there was a couple of IBC upgrades, IBC being the inter-blockchain communication protocol that Cosmos chains use, although actually now more than just Cosmos chains, which is a very exciting piece of news, that they use to communicate without having to rely on bridges. I've bitched about bridges on here before. I will probably do it again at some point. At the last minute, aborted doing a release last week. So we're just looking at 1123 now. And what we've had some stuff added to the NYM CLI, right, which is that handy little Rust tool for if you want to interact with the contracts or the chain and you don't want to have to go through the NixD binary because it's a bit wordier. So that has had some identity key signing support added to it, which is nice if you want to do identity key signing, like if you're doing bonding and stuff, but you want to do it from the CLI, which is great. Obviously, always CLI is good. Now, the node tester package has also been merged in. It's not fully ready quite yet, but we're almost there. And this is going to be a very sexy new feature, which means you can start essentially kind of testing the uptime of your node from the wallet, which is going to be very helpful for people, especially when you start a new a new node. Maybe you don't know whether you're not getting included in the active set because you don't have enough delegations or anything, and you kind of have to sit on stuff a little bit to like wait and see what your routing score is going to be and all of this kind of stuff. So this, I think, it'll just kind of it'll make it a lot easier to debug and probably give people a bit of reassurance when they're kind of starting new mix nodes as well. And other than that, it's kind of we're mostly on bug fixes for last week's release because we have a bunch of stuff in the pipeline taking up loads of time. So no particularly large features there from the changelog. Yeah, that's about it.
Bunch of stuff in the pipeline. That's the name of the game here at these DevRel AMAs, and also soon TM, folks. Don't forget that.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, everything is kind of this house of cards, right? So it's the stuff that we're kind of working on is stuff that basically touches like every bit of the system. So it takes quite a while to get it working. Now I've got out of 2FA hell, I'm going to try and join with my other account and see if this actually works.
All right, let's see.
Well, I don't have to use my phone all the time. Because I also imagine the terrible sound quality is probably annoying to you guys as well.
Let me invite the other Max on stage as well. Oh, sorry. I don't know how I did that. There you are.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
This is my phone.
Okie dokie. The first community question is kind of spicy. So Salazar is saying, I heard about the upgraded VPN-like NymConnect recently. How soon is soon TM? So basically he's referring to us mentioning, NymConnect getting VPN-like system-wide functionality rather than the app-specific approach that we currently have.
Mm-hmm.
How soon is that going to happen?
I don't know. Have we spoken about when that could happen yet?
I think soon TM is the right timeline here, but maybe we could talk about what needs to happen before that.
Yes. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure what we can actually say. I don't want to just say, soon TM has kind of become meaningless, right? Yeah, I think that's all I can kind of say to that. I'm not 100% sure what the current status is. I think you might have a better idea of that.
I don't have a great idea of that either. All I know is that we started talking about it quite a bit recently. So, we put out our newsletter. I think that mentioned the extended NymConnect Plus as well. So I guess, what I don't see though from a dev perspective is what needs to happen before we can release something like that.
From a dev perspective, right? You have to kind of think about it in terms of like how much we can kind of borrow from the existing mixnet, how much we have to create something new, essentially, right? In terms of the actual infrastructure of like making new code and stuff, like making new connections and everything, that's kind of fine. We can piggyback on the existing infrastructure that we have. However, there's maybe two things. There's one kind of as of yet unannounced kind of project, which will be kind of hopefully quite radically reducing the amount of late. Actually, no. Do you know what? Just scrap that. Basically, what we also need to do is it's less from a code perspective and it's more from kind of like a social coordination perspective, right? Like at the moment, aside from those gateways that are in NymConnect, then there's no incentivization essentially for gateways. And I think one of the things that maybe people forget quite a lot is that basically it's kind of like a weakest link in the chain kind of thing, where regardless of how fast the mix nodes are that your packets might be going through, if the gateway that you're connected to or the gateway that your recipient is connected to is like slow or throttled, then that is essentially going to be that's the bottleneck, right, for all of your traffic. So I'd say one of the things that we're also looking at is kind of a way to quite soon, hopefully, get gateways and services incentivized basically and get them rewarded. Because as soon as we do that, from what we've seen, and I think at the moment, like the mixnet shows quite a good contrast, or like it shows a good stark contrast between how people treat incentivized infrastructure and how they don't. Like gateways at the moment, there are some gateways that people are running. Some of them are good, some of them are not. There's not that many of them. And yeah, that's because it's essentially kind of like a voluntary cost that you're taking on right now. Versus mixed nodes, which are the most kind of, there's a lot of kind of very good logging, monitoring, very well fleshed out like DevOps and sysadmin infrastructure around these things. And that makes sense because people are actually getting paid to spend their time doing this. So it's kind of like a confluence of things, right? As soon as you have rewards and you have gateways, then you'll get good gateways. And then having good gateways is essentially like removing the current bottleneck on speed. That was a very long-winded way of saying that, but yeah. Sorry, I've been programming all day.
No, that makes sense because obviously, what guarantees quality of service network-wide is incentivization. That's the whole thing about the NYM network. And obviously, once we find a way to incentivize gateways as well, that will probably contribute overall quality of service. Because right now, from what I understand, mixed nodes have a pretty high quality of service, and also our operators by now are pretty solid at running mixed nodes. But then when it comes to gateways, it's a bit of a foster child right now because of the lack of incentives. So it's obviously very important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and exactly. This is the bottleneck that everyone kind of forgets about. It's just removing that bottleneck, which is fine. It will happen. It's cool, and hopefully in the next couple of months, which is slightly more exact than soon TM.
we can use soon TM. It's actually our trademark now. I think we should probably embrace it. These AMAs cannot be what they are if we don't at least once or maybe 10 times say soon TM.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to the next question, also referring to our newsletter from Super Maya. Thanks for the question, by the way. This was written in the NYM newsletter. Research is also being done into using the current network of mixed nodes as a 2-hop WireGuard VPN with no logs and anonymous payments. Can we talk a bit more about that? What this means?
Yeah, cool. If that was in the, I haven't actually read the newsletter this week. I've kind of been wrapped up and stuff. So
Super Maya was really smart because he already prefaced that in a way that makes sure that we can actually talk about it.
Okay, cool. That's fantastic. So what I was actually talking about before, on the kind of in terms of like reusing our infrastructure, right? Is exactly you kind of can imagine this thing basically as kind of like what it says in the 10. It's a 2-hop WireGuard VPN. How does that actually work? Then what you would have is you would have some nodes running it. I'm not sure if we've hammered down exactly on like whether it's only a subset of nodes or who it is. But you can basically imagine, at the moment, your traffic has 5 hops when you go through the mixnet, right? Which is very, very fast. Then, especially at the moment, because gateways aren't incentivized, then you have one bad connection in there, and then your packets are throttled. Yeah, especially with regards to when it's the actual gateways. If it's a mixed node that drops some packets, then whatever. It's a few packets. We have packet retransmission that works a bit too well, maybe at the moment. But your gateways are a problem. Okay, so you have a 2-hop WireGuard VPN. WireGuard is very well known. It's like the bedrock of like most VPN services now. It's tested. It's secure. So having a 2-hop one, you're removing the like 1-hop problem that you have from a VPN, and just adding 2. So your exit, if we think of it as entrance and exit, then your entrance knows where you're coming from, your exit knows where you're going, but neither of them know all sides of it, right? And so that's one kind of, I would say, improvement on a maybe like a more standard VPN, right? The second thing is that most VPNs at the moment, even if you're using a VPN or whatever, you're doxing yourself, right? Like you're doxing yourself with your payment information. So then other advantage that this would have would then be, using zk-nyms, this first implementation of the coconut credential kind of a scheme to then anonymize your payments then as well. I'd say that's the slightly more in-depth side of it. And obviously there will be, this is incentivized as well. So this isn't like a free extra service or anything. This is also something that nodes should be paid for too. Yeah.
Amazing. Actually, I'll be totally honest. When I found out that this is something that we're thinking about, I was super excited because it solves one of the key constraints of a mixnet due to how a mixnet works, which is latency, of course. If you have control as a user over whether to use the mixnet for extra ultra private communications or use something that is still very, very private and significantly better than a centralized player, providing you with a pinky promise, a VPN service that, hey, I'm definitely not harvesting and selling your data at all. And that's still a big step forward, but solves the issue of latency for those use cases where you need.
You can imagine a situation in which these two systems are kind of not kind of disintermediate. You can imagine a situation in which you have like a unified user interface for this stuff as well, where you can kind of imagine, imagine it's like a slider or like a mixing deck or something, and you're like, okay, well, if you want like almost no latency, then obviously you're kind of the privacy assurances that you do have will go down somewhat because you're using a 2-hop VPN rather than, even if it has anonymous payments and no logs, you're still using that versus a 5-hop mixnet. But you can kind of imagine it where you have like a slider of, if you just want kind of some everyday privacy and you want very low latency, then you'd probably be using that. And then above a certain point, so long as the latency was acceptable to you, there's another big thing in the pipeline which I can't really talk about yet, or I don't think I can talk about it yet, which will like dramatically reduce the latency of the mixnet itself. And we have a couple of things in the pipeline. We have Outfox as well. This is the packet format that's been being worked on for a while, and all of this kind of stuff. But like, there will still be a threshold, a basic bottom threshold of latency that you have to accept to use the mixnet. Hopefully, it'll become very minor, right? But you can kind of imagine the situation where, from a unified user interface, you're like, well, if I accept the base threshold of minimal mixnet delay, then you're also getting this extra more ironclad privacy, or so you could kind of like blend it as you wish, right? Which I think is also more maybe responsive to how people actually like want to use this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a scale between a user configurability, but also simplicity. So we need to make sure that the Nym mixnet or any product that Nym puts out is usable for everybody, and provides adequate privacy for the use case that they want to use it for. So that's really great stuff coming. I'm super excited about that. Moving on to the next question, I think it's going to be a quick one because we already spoke about the testnet last time during the previous DevRel AMA. But we're getting a question about how to get NYMT from the faucet, and is the sandbox dead, basically, from Salazar.
No, Sandbox should still be up. I think the faucet is dead from when we were like tearing Sandbox up and down quite a lot. So I think we just kind of have to fix it. I mean, for right now, there hasn't really been, at least that I'm aware of, like a real reason that people are wanting to use the Sandbox, considering mainnet is free. But yeah, Salazar, we will be we just need to fix the faucet, basically. That can happen quite quickly. I'm going to jump on the next question as well, Pawnflate's question. Are there any plans to enforce it? No, there's no plans to enforce it. Like, it's more just kind of like it's more like an honesty-based thing of people who are wanting to declare that they're running these families, so you don't get a full ban of those families. Basically, this is kind of for like the particularly large players in the mixnet with regards to like the amount of tokens that they have. Really, yeah, that's about it. Oh, Bikram's question is quite a fun one.
Let's ask this from Alexia. Are you ready for this question, Alexia? Just as an exam, whether you've been doing your homework for the past few weeks. So, are there any specific features or functionalities within the Nym ecosystem that differentiate it from other privacy projects? Question mark. Great
question. Okay, I may need some input from Max there as well, but basically, the way in which we see it, or the way in which, our competitive advantage, let's say, they put it such in business terms always, the fact that we have the mixnet and all the different hops allow us to achieve much greater privacy than some other tools, let's say VPN, Tor. Our strength also lies in the fact that we have a chain that allows us to incentivize the network, which is not necessarily something that other privacy-oriented products have. And it's also some of, like a lot of privacy-oriented projects will have that as that point as weakness very often. Max, if you want to add anything, please feel free as well. I'm just rambling about random stuff.
The other two base things are it's kind of like a dual thing, right? So it's like cover traffic and our packet encoding format. So the fact that everything is chopped up into identically sized packets.
Yep.
They're encrypted in the same way, so they're all identical, and you have cover traffic, right? Yeah, I'd say that's one of the other functional.
The coconut credentials also will be a big thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. Coconut credentials will, because then you can pay anonymously as well, which is...
Mark has told me that there's active work currently ongoing in regards to this. One of our weaknesses is that they're only accessible through the CLI, so not super user-friendly, but I think there's going to be work ongoing in regards to user wallets to store the credentials and be able to interact with them in a much easier manner.
All right. That's a pass. Alexia, good job.
Thanks, Sudo. And thanks, Max, for your help.
Yeah, next question. Hopefully I'm not skipping any. So next question is also from Palmflake, a good friend. How close are we to web wallet capabilities so far as being able to develop delegating from the Explorer?
I don't think there's any active work necessarily right now in terms of like delegation from a web wallet. It would really demand, I think it would also partially depend on like the actual demand for a web wallet as well. Because as much as they can be useful, obviously like MetaMask and Kepler, two pretty dominant ways that people interact with kind of deployed crypto front ends. There's also, they bring with them like a whole other host of kind of security considerations that have to be brought into the development cycle. I would say if that is going to happen, then it would probably be once some of these kind of bigger, longer standing projects are kind of have maybe either been deployed or kind of come to more of a close, because that would be a big project as well. Just in terms of also like, the security side of things. Obviously, there are some components that we already do have, which would maybe be helpful for a web wallet. Obviously, we have, the stuff with the TypeScript SDK, the fact that you can like run the WASM client in a web worker, right? That's good. There's also, if you look at something like MetaMask, one of the ways that MetaMask, I suppose, kind of defends itself against certain types of attack that you get with anything in a browser is it has like, I think it uses like 3 different sandboxes to run code in, for instance, which makes it, it makes these things like quite an interesting task from an engineering perspective. So yeah, it's not a small thing to securely do a web wallet. So I would say maybe in the future in terms of delegating, but for right now, yeah, just the desktop wallet is the way, or the CLI. You can always use the CLI tool. You can script with the CLI tool as well, which is obviously like a nice added benefit if you want to do a bit of a set and forget kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. So earlier we asked this question, or we got this question, I think, during like a previous DevRel AMA, and then I spoke to some people internally. What it looks like right now is that mobile wallet is probably not coming sooner than something web based, but like Max said, it's a pretty.
I mean, mobile is a different question actually. Like mobile, I think I'd like mobile development also has like its own host of stuff, which is partially to do with like the very high walls of the walled gardens of iOS and Android app stores. Obviously, there's stuff like F-Droid that people can use, but that's probably a very small chunk of people who are going to be installing the app. Sorry to go across you there, Suda, but yeah.
I was just basically saying that a lot goes into a wallet, and while we do hear a lot this question, both mobile and also like web-based stuff, but it's not very easy to drop something like that because of what you mentioned. Like there are a whole host of security concerns. An app that we developed, and is running on the machine itself rather than in a browser as an extension or something like that. It's like way easier to control those possible security concerns. Am I right about that? I'm just basically speaking out of my ass here.
No, it's good. I mean, like a browser environment, like browser environments are quite, they're quite insecure and they're quite kind of, there's a lot of vectors of attack from a browser-based environment that, like a lot more maybe than a desktop app. If you're in a position where a desktop app is like, has become maybe vulnerable, then maybe your computer's already like pretty rooted. That's already a really bad situation. Whereas like there's a lot more vectors of possible problems or security concerns in a web environment, in a browser environment, basically.
All right. Moving on to the next question. Bikram, sorry, I'm skipping yours because I'm not sure I understand it, so please rephrase it. And until then, Vincent asks, Vinlex nodes, some wide question, assuming in the future and Tor gives green light, can Tor be integrated to a mixnet like Nym? Wait, I don't understand this.
Mm-hmm.
Is it even possible? Tor, like the mixnet being integrated into Tor. I don't know. Max, what do you make of that?
They're 2 different types of overlay networks. They work in different ways. I don't think it necessarily really makes sense to do that, to be honest. at least off the top of my head, I don't even really know what that would necessarily look like. They're kind of coexisting technologies that are also complementary technologies, and they both do a particular thing. The particular thing they do of passing traffic between 2 points via a series of hops, they do it in different ways to get different effects. Tor, you open a circuit, it allows you to do, let's say, more synchronous kind of things. You can browse, you can stream through Tor, whereas the mixnet is more suited to asynchronous stuff just because of the way that we pass packets around. It's kind of apples and oranges, and I don't really see a situation when you would want to running one inside the other. I don't even think that necessarily makes sense. So no, not really, probably. Here's my answer to that.
Well, thank you. I, with my uninitiated eyes, agree with that answer. Anyways, moving on to the next question. I don't know if you know anything about Berlin that's going on right now, but No Doubt Note is asking us, who of you is next week in Berlin?
I don't know what's happening in Berlin.
Not sure. I'm definitely not there, unfortunately.
Something cool, maybe. No, neither am I. Obviously, because I don't even know what's going on. So.
Yeah, note if you're based there, then let me know, because I'm definitely going to be back in Berlin a couple of times this year. So let's hang out if we're ever there at the same time. Hans joined the chat. Hi Hans, good to see you. With a lot of questions. How is the NYM client built within the network requester? How does it traverse NAT?
How it traverses NAT, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. How is it built into the network requester? Check out the code. So it's basically just importing. It's importing a load of the libraries that are actually in the Rust SDK. So yeah, it was kind of if I remember correctly, it was a kind of a first proof of concept-y kind of thing of using the Rust SDK to essentially integrate a client process into a binary as opposed to running the client on its own. And the NAT question, I would have to get back to you about.
What's NAT, by the way, for a total noob like me?
NAT is network address translation. Basically, it's this idea of when you're behind your router, you can imagine that everything behind your router, right, is kind of you could have a private network. But maybe if you have what we call a static IP, so an IP address, right, is essentially just the address that kind of denotes a singular point in the World Wide Web, right? So say if you're running a server, okay, you're running something on a VPS. A mixnode is a good example of this, right? You have what's called a static IP. So your IP never changes. Now that's really, really helpful because that means that you can always communicate with that node, right? So long as you either know the IP originally, so maybe you have the IP address in something like a smart contract, which is what we currently have, or you have a domain name which points to this IP address, right? That's what a static IP is. Now, most people at home do not have a static IP, and that's just because of the way the internet's set up. I'm not going to kind of necessarily get into that. But if you imagine you have a router, which is kind of publicly accessible via a single IP address, then, but you also have maybe stuff behind that, right? Then you have to have some kind of translation of how something from the wider internet can essentially talk to these nodes behind this router, right? And that's what NAT is for. It's a network address translation, basically. So it's when you kind of your packet goes from a global public IP address, and then it's translated, enters, a local network, and then the IP address is converted to a private IP address. So yeah, that probably wasn't a very good explanation of what NAT is, but maybe a good high level one.
No, it was.
Yeah, this is why I draw a lot when I do talks and diagrams, because I'm not very good at just explaining off the top of my head.
Well, I did learn something again today, just like I often do on these DevRel AMAs. It's still a pleasure to run these. All right, well, moving on to the next question. And sorry, guys, to hijack the AMA with my own question, but I get to do that because I'm a moderator and you're not, so deal with it. Next question, also from Supermaya. I think it's referring back to an earlier part of the conversation. So zk-nyms are already functional and available, but can only be used through the CLI? ?
Yes and no. zk-nyms, which is this thing that we're developing at the moment, they are an implementation of the Coconut credential scheme, which is the selective disclosure scheme that we're kind of going to be relying upon to do stuff like private payments. And then hopefully, well, not hopefully, at some point, hopefully soon, but definitely at some point in the future, we will be also making like available for other uses, because they do also have other uses. What does exist right now is the ability to generate a selective disclosure credential. And that does exist. That exists on a sandbox. And there is a little like demo site as well, which is called I'll just type it in the chat when I remember it. I think it's code-demo.nymtech.net. Nym, God, I can't even spell Nym today. Wow. There you go. Those are there, so you can kind of you can play around with at least an instance of a Coconut credential generation. So you can kind of see how you can create a credential with some private and some public information. You can re-randomize that credential and all of this. So that aspect of it is there. The following question then is, what isn't there? And what isn't there yet necessarily is a deployed version of both the distributed key generation stuff, right? And I mean deployed in the sense that you actually have multiple parties, multiple validators running this to actually take part in the creation of a secret. But there's also some other infrastructure underneath that is being developed as well, which isn't really super public yet. So yeah, you can go on this demo site, you can play around with that in terms of the generation of a credential itself, but there's still a lot of work surrounding that to get it to a stage where it can be kind of deployed in a secure way.
All right. To be honest, was a bit over my head, but but hopefully it wasn't over everybody else's head. Next question is from Hans. Actually, these are 4 questions, but I'm just going to pick one, which I think is a great one. Why WireGuard? Do you have any info on that, Max? Why are we thinking about the dual hop WireGuard implementation?
I mean, why WireGuard specifically? I mean, it's a well-known, well-used, open source, secure implementation, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose probably just that. I mean, it's everyone knows WireGuard. You've maybe used something using WireGuard without even knowing about it before. And, why reinvent the wheel? I think that's about it off the top of my head. There might be some other reasons, but I don't know about them, if they are.
A bit more generally, of course, what we already explained. So while the mixnet will necessarily come with latency penalty, such an implementation or such a solution can reduce that quite significantly. So I guess that's also important. But that's not specific to WireGuard. That's just mixnet versus
Oh no, I mean, just WireGuard is just the protocol that it'll be using to actually, communicate between the nodes that are part of this 2-hop VPN.
Makes sense. Looking for the next question. In the meantime, a lot of comments, sifting through.
No dump node. Is it Awesomwasm now? The CosmWasm conference. I think some members of the team are going to be present at Awesomwasm. I'm pretty sure people are. So yeah, go there, say hey, get a t-shirt, and some stickers.
Hans is asking to explain 2-hop VPN, dude, sir, which is new. I've never heard that one before, but I think we kind of did. Is there anything else to say on the?
We already did at the beginning. I mean, it's going to be a 2-hop VPN that will be using some of the nodes that already exist. So it's not going to be separate infrastructure. It'll obviously be a separate process that's running on some of those machines, but yeah. And we will also have anonymous payments for it as well. So that's a nice little summary of that, I think. Looking at Bikram's question, I think this is his rewording that you asked them to do before, which is what measures are being taken by the team to ensure the security and privacy of user data within the network. Or we can answer what measures have been implemented in the NYM credential system to ensure privacy and protect against de-anonymization attempts by malicious actors. I'm going to focus on the second one because the first one I think is just kind of is already answered, or at least has already been answered a lot more in the literature and blog posts. We ensure, if we're talking about the privacy of user data itself, the user data is protected by the multiple encryption that is used kind of as packets move through the network, right? So everything is everything is always encrypted and it's multiply encrypted. So even if you had a malicious actor that had a full path of mixed nodes, all they would be able to know would be they would be able to trace where, like, that a packet came from one mixed node to another, right? That's it. All packets, all the packet payloads are encrypted, and they can only be decrypted by the recipient. So that's how that's protected. And then, the metadata protections, I think we've kind of gone over quite a lot. So looking at the credential scheme stuff, what measures have been implemented to ensure privacy and protect against de-anonymization attempts. So this is why we're spending so much time setting up all of the stuff for DKG, or distributed key generation, right? What does this actually mean? If you imagine a situation where you had one party that was like making the key, the secret, the base secret of these credentials, then that's obviously a problem. Yeah, because you have, if I make a bunch of credentials for people, maybe I keep an eye on them, and then maybe Sudo and Lorexia, they're both service providers, and someone spends a credential with them. Now, if that credential was just a single credential, right? So it was like you can imagine a credential as like a very long alphanumeric string. And if you go on the Coconut demo page that I posted in the chat, you'll be able to see this as well. It's a very, very long kind of string of what looks like random numbers. Okay. If you imagine a situation where I'm the only person that makes those and they stay the same, then that's obviously a problem, because Sudo and Lorexia, these malicious service providers, they can say, oh, well, someone spent a credential with me, this credential at this time for this service. And you're like, oh, okay, that's very interesting. That's cool. Well, I know that I kind of gave that credential to, address N123. And you're like, oh, okay, boom. So that's obviously an issue. How do we protect against this? There's a couple of ways that we protect against this. So number one is Coconut credential or zk-nyms are re-randomizable. What does that actually mean? What it means is that I can get a credential that, again, like I said, is this very long, it's represented as this very long, seemingly random-looking set of letters and numbers, and I can re-randomize it. So I can basically turn that into a completely different-looking string of letters and numbers. But it remains valid as a credential. What that actually means is that this credential that I then show to someone and say, hey, this is me, this is cool, then there's some code that they can run that's essentially like verifies the validity of credential, right? That I'm actually not just sending them a random alphanumeric string, but I'm sending them something that is actually representing a credential, right? And re-randomization is great, because that means that I send you a credential, you re-randomize it, so now I don't know what actually randomize it, and you spend it with Sudo, and then you re-randomize it again, and maybe use it to if we're thinking of it as a login token, not a payment thing, then maybe you also use it to log in to Alexia's service, right? And there's no linkability then between the three instances of me making a token and giving it a credential, rather than giving it to you using it with Sudo service and you using it with Alexia's service, right? So that's one way that de-anonymization has been mitigated, because there's no linkability there between the different uses of it. And the other way is to mitigate the problem of having one party that knows, that kind of generates the full key that's used for the secret. Because, and this is what I was talking about before with distributed key generation. So then what happens is when someone wants to create a credential, you have a process where multiple parties take part in creating some of these keys, and then they all kind of combine them together. What that again means is that there's no single party there from the validators, from the people who actually generate the credentials. There's no single party there that can also then be like, that credential, yeah, we made that and gave it to blah. So those are two pretty powerful ways of ensuring protecting against the anonymization attempts. And then obviously, when you're actually doing the use and the creation of these credentials, then you run it through the mixnet too. So then you don't even know the IP address of the credential that you made a very small part of that you're sending to someone. So you can kind of see how all of these things kind of like build up, with the basic logic being you want to break linkability between any of the kind of instances in like the lifetime of this credential, from creation to use again. You want to break break the ability to make links between any of those instances when it touches an actor that that could be malicious, right? Hopefully that answers your question.
Hopefully.
I lost you for a sec, Max, but did you elaborate on the selective disclosure of attributes as well?
No, I didn't. Do you want to do that?
Sure. Well, basically, very simply put, the selective disclosure of attribute just allows the individual to share only the necessary and what they deem relevant attributes with verifiers or parties that would like to check some information about them. So basically meaning that you can share whatever information that you decide to without having to disclose everything that may be on that credential. Max, do you want to add anything?
No, that was good.
I don't know if that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'd say the only to make that less abstract as an example for people, I'd say the classic thing is always well, actually no, I'm not going to do the classic one. I'm going to do the cool one. So we made over a year ago now. We made a proof of concept for using Coconut credentials to make a privacy-preserving COVID passport. Because obviously, when they still had COVID passports everywhere, and everyone had a QR code to have to go into buildings and stuff, then you showed this QR code and it was scanned by whoever was checking. Basically doing the access control of whatever space you were trying to move in or out of, and that had a load of other information attached to it, as well as the fact that you were able to go into a restaurant or go on a plane, something like this, which is a problem. Then you're leaking all of this information everywhere, and that information can be used to essentially track you. So what we did with the COVID passport was it also generated a QR code, right? It was represented as a gift that it was valid, but it didn't dox you, basically, right? So all of the other information that's attached to it, which is kind of part of the COVID passport, your name, your birthday, blah, 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 all of this, that was information that was not disclosed, right? That was kept secret. And therefore, someone was check this QR code that said, yes, this person is able to move through this space, but that was all that they learned, right? Versus the normal COVID passports, which it was like, oh, this person is this is their full name and this is where they were born and this is their birthday and this is where they live. All of this kind of extraneous information that actually they didn't really need, and was a very good tool for just kind of collecting data on how people moved and tracking people.
And that basically also summarizes the paradigm of credentials versus ID, where, in the paradigm of ID, you gather all of this information, or I prove that I am Simon by throwing all of this info at you, my mother's name, my birth date, all of that stuff. Even though in the specific case of a COVID passport, what information do people need to know about me verifiably?
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I've been vaccinated or I've tested negative in the past 24 hours. All of the rest is totally irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly.
Alexia, I think you were about to say something.
No. That's exactly it, basically.
All right. Well, I think on that note, we arrived to the end of this DevRel AMA. So do you guys have any closing remarks?
Big things in the works. Happy to have Alexia also joining the DevRel crew. Because now the three of us, and 3 is a good number.
Super happy to have joined as well. Very exciting work. And I'm thrilled to be part of the community. So thanks everyone who listened in.
Well, it was amazing to have you on, and looking forward to have you on for the upcoming ones as well. So see you guys when it comes to DevRel AMAs, at least. See you guys in 2 weeks. As usual, there's a poll up for this call, so you need to DM. I'm going to leave in chat the name of the lovely gentleman who's responsible for creating these pull-ups for all of you, Mr. Pizza J, one of our community managers.
Awesome.
So DM for your pull-up. You can also do that, Alexia. So
yeah, definitely.
If you want. This will commemorate your first appearance.
Exactly. Exactly. Awesome.
So have a lovely evening, everybody. If you have any further questions, then you can catch us in chats. We're happy to answer them. Also, make sure to join the next DevRel AMA as well, and community call next Friday as well. Until then, have fun and a lovely evening, everybody. Take care.
Ciao, guys.
Thanks, Suda. Ciao, guys. Bye, everyone.